Hi, everybody. This is Dawn Mitchell, and welcome to Dawn of Sports. This week, a great guest, Jim Souhan, has a friend that has friends, and you're going to meet him. Howard Megdal is a powerhouse. He's created not only the Nine newsletter, but the nexthoops.com, all about women's basketball. It's a newsroom for you. So, any of you ravenous, you want to listen in because Howard has picked up the torch and has carried it through for women's sports, and I am here for it. I hope you are too.
Yes, welcome to Dawn of Sports. She is Dawn Mitchell from Fox9. I'm Jim Souhan from the Star Tribune. This is one of our many shows at TalkNorth.com. Check out Russo, LaPanta on hockey, Gorg on hockey, Krasinski on basketball, me and John on football and the Viking Update Show, former Vikings general manager Jeff Diamond on the Vikings, Mike Grimm on the Gophers, Randy Shaver on high school football, John Millay on preps, Roy Smalley, Lavelle Neal, myself on baseball. I always leave some out because we have so many shows, outdoor content, everything else. Dawn's show, we talk about all sports, but we also want to forward women's sports. Howard has done that probably as well as anybody in the country. I'm looking forward to our conversation with him. For today, Dawn, let's start with the hottest story in Minnesota, which is the Vikings. Not only I'm not surprised they won against the Giants. I'm mildly surprised at how good they looked winning. That was impressive.
Yes, and first of all, I just want to be thankful because the first few minutes of that game did not look like it was going to end up that way.
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh no, my head was in my hands." And then how they snapped into it. And yes, the Giants are not a very good football team, but exactly what you said, Jim. They played together. I loved how Sam Darnold was confident, connecting on the first 12 passes, finally airing it out. And as Justin Jefferson says, he was trusting me when I'm double teamed because that's going to happen. And it wasn't just one person. We saw Aaron Jones have 94 yards. So you want to have that hand in hand with the passing game. And then the defense, my word. Yes, I was just not surprised, but kind of like, wow, okay, a little relieved maybe, and thankful because yeah, every team in the NFL, you and I have talked about this before, the preseason is so shortened and they only get practices if they're getting the joint practices with another team, that sometimes the first week of the NFL is like preseason still. And so you're going to have to work out the bugs and work out kind of this is for real now. So I was pleasantly surprised once they started getting their gripping, at how well they did and how they continued it. So both sides of the ball, even, special teams did okay. And then they ended up playing better. So I think that's just how your first few weeks. So, and it's always easier, as you and I know, to go into a winning locker room. So, what a great way just to start the year off.
And it was a good. Well, we'll get into why it was a good week one in a lot of ways. First, I want to let you know we're coming to you from the Aquarius Home Services Studios, and we want to thank our sponsors: Rudy Luther Toyota, Minnesota Masonic Charities, and Natrium. Natrium.com. That's Natreum. CBD, THC, all kinds of varieties. I love using that stuff. We'll tell you more about them in a minute. Really, one of the reasons for pessimism going into the season was this division looked like it was going to be very difficult. Caleb Williams Caleb Williams has people excited about the Bears in Chicago as they have been since Walter Payton was playing. The Packers looked great in the postseason and the late run last year. They had Jordan Love, and the Lions looked like a Super Bowl contender. Well, the Lions won a tough game against a good team, had to go to overtime to do it, but they won that first game. Packers lose their first game, lose their quarterback for a month, and the Bears couldn't function on offense. Those things combined with the Vikings winning while looking good, it does change. If you want to be an optimist, now you have a reason for optimism.
And I'm always an optimist. I know sometimes that annoys people because I think you have to play the games, right? I'm still going to stand by what I said last podcast is I don't know until the third game in. Because yes, you can look great about against the Giants. How are you going to look against the 49ers, right? So I don't do the high and low. I'm pretty consistent. Like, okay, but when you see in the game what they do well, and the Vikings came out with a victory, and then you look at the other teams, like you just don't know, right? Jordan Love gets hurt. Thankfully, it's not as bad as what it kind of looked like. That, as we have learned with Kirk Cousins, that can shift the trajectory of the rest of your season. And still, very well, it might hurt right now. But just let them play the games. I've heard so many fans go, yeah, well, I'm glad they won that because it's over after this. They got a tough stretch. They're not going to win any. And it used to get me mad. And not even when I was here, no matter what city I was in, that mentality is like that. But I'm like, you don't know. Just let them play the game. You're stealing joy from yourself. Just let them play the game. Let it play out.
Yeah. One player I'd like to highlight. I've always loved the way Aaron Jones runs. I always thought he was
Yeah.
just one of those athletes who's who plays the sport better than the sum of his physical abilities. He's not the fastest guy in the world. He's not the biggest guy in the world, but he always seems to set up his blocks. He seems to be able to freeze defenders. And he reminds me of a lot of great players in the NFL who played speed positions, but necessarily weren't all that fast. But they were fast. They were football fast. Adam Thielen, Jerry Rice, Chris Carter. These people did not have great 40 times, but it felt like nobody could ever catch them. That's the way I think Aaron Jones is. And if he stays healthy, he really simplifies things for Sam Darnold.
Oh, he does, and he a lot of people caught it that how he jumped into the stand. So I said, are you gonna have to rename the leap if you do that at U.S. Bank Stadium? And he started laughing. Goes, I hadn't really thought about that. He goes, I don't know, maybe I'll name it after the county that the stadium is in. So he called it the Hennepin Leap.
The Hennepin Hop.
So yeah, the Hennepin Hop, maybe. Hey, you might want to suggest that to him. So he said he's going to have to ruminate on that a little bit and come up with one. But he has been a joy to watch, and Ty Chandler and he seem to really play well, kind of in synergy with that tandem going on. But I also, obviously, you talked about speed. Andrew Van Ginkel, that pick six, that blistering pace, 1.16 seconds, beating his own record, by the way. When he was in Miami, he had 1.26 seconds. It's such a random stat, but how quickly you can either put the nail in the coffin in a game or change the complexion of the game. And he's just so humble about it. He's just so humble. So he was fun to watch. And maybe another guy that's so humble because you can never find him in the locker room, but he consistently plays well. Pat Jones the second, right? With those 2 sacks. So these guys that kind of like to go maybe in the locker room under the radar, like, oh, yeah, are showing powerhouse on the field. I enjoy that kind of play.
Yeah, no doubt. We'll do something quick on the Twins. We'll touch on the Lynx. We'll let Howard get more into the conversation with the Lynx. I don't want to do too much in-depth stuff on the Twins because by the time people hear this, that another game might have been played, another injury might have occurred. So let's just go big picture here. Rocco Baldelli rips the team. So a Saturday, Baldelli takes Ober out earlier than people would like to see. Durand gives it up. Terrible loss, maybe the
Mm-hmm.
worst loss of the season. Sunday, they have a bad loss where they look lethargic. Baldelli rips them after the game. Um, unlike a lot of fans, I think very highly of Baldelli. He's a very, very intelligent guy. He's a very good human being, treats people well. I think he knows what he's doing, even if he doesn't do things exactly the way you would want him to do them. But I will say this: when you can only play that card so many times. You can only play it so many times in a year. You can only play it so many times during your career as a manager. It'll be very interesting to see how the team responds to him over the rest of this regular season, because things tend to go one way or another when people are challenged in that way. Either it wakes them up and they go, he's right, let's get our butts in gear, or they can become resentful and you lose the clubhouse. I think this group will take it the right way, but it is something to watch the rest of the year.
Well, I'm glad you didn't say it's us jinxing the Twins, because the last time we talked, we are like, yeah, look, remember you were saying you're covering the Lynx going the postseason. Twins looks like they're going the postseason. I think the clubhouse knows Rocco well, and it takes a lot to see that side of Rocco Baldelli. That takes a lot. All of us that have known him for a while, he just doesn't rip people. He's always more philosophical about how things have gone and kind of, yeah, that wasn't the best, but I can see where this and this happened. The fact that he did that, my gut says they're going to respond. Is it going to be enough? Because they've got some other teams that they really have to, go through in order to stay in playoff contention. But I think he picks his spots. And when other time are you going to get it together than now? Because they were sinking like a lead balloon, as my mom used to say. So, you got to do something. So I'm thinking it's that because they know him better than I don't think it's kind of hard, Jim, to hide someone's personality nowadays, right? So it's not like this is the Rocco we know in media and the clubhouse knows it different. He's just not built that way. So for him to get that fired up, I'm just hoping it has that first effect.
Yeah, I hope so too. Hey, we want to thank our sponsors, starting with Rudy Luther Toyota, not only a big supporter of this podcast and this network, but also just a great supporter of women's sports.
Ready for a women-forward car dealership? Rudy Luther Toyota empowers their many women on staff in sales, management, and service. Whether you are looking for a new Toyota or pre-owned vehicle, Rudy Luther Toyota has something for everyone. Every vehicle comes with a Luther Advantage. 10 cents off fuel and car wash discounts at holiday stations, Luther Advantage warranty, and 5-day return policy on pre-owned vehicles. Located just 5 minutes west of downtown Minneapolis, off 394 and General Mills Boulevard. And they're also hiring. Want to join the team but don't know where to start? Visit rudyluthertoyota.com today.
Would also like to thank another great Minnesota company, Minnesota Masonic Charities.
When people think of the Freemasons, they often think of secret handshakes and unusual hats, and of course, the pancake breakfast. Minnesota Masonic Charities would prefer that you think about the work that they do right here in our community. Places like the Masonic Cancer Center at the University of Minnesota or the Masonic Children's Hospital and the Masonic Home in Bloomington. They are just a few examples of the important work that the Freemasons support here in Minnesota. As part of the largest fraternal organization in the world, Masons have consistently answered the call when it comes to charitable needs. I am happy that Minnesota Masonic Charities has chosen Minnesota Bound and this podcast as a place to help spread the word. We look forward to learning so much more about their many programs here in the weeks to come.
And I'd like to tell you about Natrium, natrium.com, Natrium. You can also find their wildflower stores around. Their mothership store is in St. Louis Park. They have locations everywhere. There is one near you. There's a wildflower right by me. And I have been using their products since long before we ever thought to ask them if they wanted to sponsor the program. They have everything. They have dips, oils, balms, gummies, drinks. I like the drinks. They even have cream soda flavored drink, which is one of my favorite flavors. I like the balms. I like the oils. My wife likes the gummies. I like the gummies too. And it can be for anything from just relaxing a little bit to de-stressing to getting that nice little take the edge off feeling at the end of the day without having to drink alcohol or worry about a hangover. It can help with sleep. It can help with headaches. My wife loves it for sleep. I especially like it for headaches. Go in, talk to the experts. They will steer you in the right direction. It's just a great company with great products. You can go to the store or you can go to natrium.com and ask and order delivery. I highly recommend all of their products. All right, now up next.
I think it's your BFF, Jim.
Yes, I love this stuff.
It's your BFF.
And the cool thing about talknorth.com too is, podcasts are so personal. You're just getting to hear us talk the way we act normally, right? We don't have radio voices on. We're not radio professionals. We're just having conversations. And so, we found out a long time ago that the best sponsors for us are people whose products we actually use, can talk just naturally about. So Natrium is definitely one of those. So thanks to all of our sponsors. Up next, Howard Megdal, founder of the 9 newsletter and the Next Women's Basketball Newsroom. As promised, today's guest, Howard Megdal. It's going to take me half an hour to read his bio. I'll try to keep it as short as possible. But to sum it up, kind of a champion of women's sports, an entrepreneur. He's a baseball writer. He writes for Forbes.com. But the reason we have him on today is because he's done such great work and such innovative work in the realm of women's sports coverage. He's the editor of the 9 newsletter, and he's founder of the Next Women's Basketball Newsroom. And let's be honest, I think everybody now has realized that women's sports are a big thing, that they are profitable, that they're worthwhile. But I think Howard was on the front edge of this push, and that's one of the many reasons we want to have him on today. So, Howard, welcome, and thanks for your time.
Always a pleasure to chat with you, Jim. You've been at the front edge of it as well.
Well, you've done more, and I would not try to put myself in your category. But let's start with this. Let's just start with some fun current events. Cheryl Reeve coming off 2 losing seasons, not adding a lot of talent in the draft the last few years, suddenly has the Minnesota Lynx second in the WNBA. I'm rather stunned by this. What have you made of it?
This is a team that is performing through the regular season at the same level as the 2017 Lynx,
Yep.
the team that last won a WNBA title in Minnesota. And so it is striking the job she has done with the players she has. As we saw, and we saw just recently with Maya Moore's number being retired, that was a team of 5 Hall of Famers. What Cheryl is doing this year is that she has turned Nafisa Collier into a first team all WNBA player and a legit MVP candidate. She is Kayla McBride playing some of the best ball of her career. And I guess the way I would take issue with it is I think she's done some really good things in free agency. I think the names weren't necessarily as big, but she's doing it in a way that has allowed the players to play the roles she needs, whether it's Alana Smith and what she is able to do in the front court, or even Courtney Williams. So she has turned into effectively her point guard, which is something that was not on a lot of bingo cards across the league. So just an incredible coaching job by her staff. And again, you go beyond just the wins and losses. Her defensive rating, offensive rating, right on par with 2017. This is a legit, excellent team. There's no mirage to it.
That's exactly right. And you hit on Courtney Williams. Lindsay Whalen and Reeve had such an incredible relationship. I mean, they would stand by the sideline before every game and just have one last talk through. And Whalen appreciated that Reeve pushed her to get in better shape, to try to elevate her game. Reeve helped make her an Olympian. She was not on the radar of the U.S. women's national team until Reeve basically pushed her, and Whalen realized exactly what she had to do to achieve that. And then Whalen leaves, and Cheryl hasn't had bad point guards between Whalen and Courtney Williams, but she hasn't had that point guard you can tell she's exactly on the same page with in every aspect, that she has that telepathic relationship with. And Courtney Williams has been that player.
It's been remarkable to see. And again, credit to Courtney Williams for being up for reinventing herself. And you started to see it last year in Chicago, but she has been better at distributing the ball than I think anyone could have seen coming out of school. The Phoenix Mercury drafted her in 2016, wanted her to be a point guard, and so quickly determined that she wouldn't be for them that the Mercury traded her to Connecticut, where she had some of her early success. But her assist percentage is right near 36. It is among the leaders in the WNBA. She is not making mistakes with the ball. Turnover percentage just above 17%. Really, really solid for somebody who is a playmaker. And it also, I think, has helped that she is one of many distributors on this team. Smith, Collier, they're terrific passing bigs. Maisha Hines-Allen was such a perfect fit for this team, doing a lot of things, quite frankly, that Jessica Shepard had done over the past couple of years for the Lynx as well. But it is a team that shares the ball incredibly well. There's a reason why they get so many good shots. It extends well beyond just trying to take advantage of matchups.
Howard, you talk about perfect fits, and it doesn't really come into play anymore now that Angel Reese is out for the rest of the season and injured. But Cheryl doesn't just go with what the popular opinion is. She for who the fit is, whether it's position wise, personality wise, that I think the popular opinion was, why did she pass on Cheryl Reese and go for Peely? And now we see uh, kind of the brilliance of her ways, especially where Reese would have basically sat on the bench a lot more with Nafisa Collier basically being in that position. But what
Mhm.
is it about Cheryl Reeves' foresight that way and be able to take the heat, so to speak, that a lot of coaches that are trying to get back to that big game, sometimes they bite on that.
It's very hard for me to understand people who underestimate Cheryl Reeve at this point in time after 4 championships, after
Right.
all the trips to the finals, and, the multiple coach of the year, the executive of the year. But this particular point has puzzled me in specific. I'm a big, Alyssa Peely, fan of her game. I think she's somebody who has a chance to be special in this league. She needed a role player here in year one. I don't know that Angel Reese would have been a great fit to be that player at that
Mhm.
time. But you even look at compared to now versus later, this is a team that, in all likelihood, is going to earn the number 2 seed in the WNBA this year. So there's been no trade off now versus later. And there's also an understanding for Cheryl Reeve, who's been doing this with great success for a decade and a half, that you need the right fit in the locker room in order for a team to maximize its potential. So you put all that together, and I guess I might feel differently about it if, say, Minnesota was middle of the pack or worse, or frankly, if you had seen Angel Reese lift the Chicago Sky to a point where they were winning, where they were outperforming where they are now, which is right at the very edges of playoff contention. But given the results, boy, it's hard to imagine how you second guess Cheryl Reeve before you even get into the fact that she knows what she's doing and she's done it, once or twice before.
Absolutely. I want to go back a little bit. You seem to be like Howard Nostradamus right now when it comes to women's basketball. You had the foresight to create the next and just want to get that women's basketball newsroom going in addition to the 9 newsletter. How did you make that? How did you just decide that, you know what? This is the area that I want to go in. Was it just your passion? Did you see that maybe there was there's a future for it? Obviously, there is.
Well, and shameless plug, I want you all to check out thenexthoops.com because it is not just me. I have this incredible team working with me, and collectively, we have a vision and understanding that women's basketball needs to be covered in depth, fully, with a fierce urgency. We have a beat reporter for every single WNBA team. We're not trying to stretch a couple of people across an entire league and all of women's college basketball as well. In order to do it right, it's creating the same infrastructure that I've seen in my 20 years in sports writing. It is accepted, it is understood, it is a given for the men. This is how we make sure that we build it for women's basketball as well, while at the same time making sure that as I extend the ladder down, that the people who are entering this business don't all look like me, and we address the real critical issue of diversity in women's sports coverage at the same time as we do it. So to me, these are two things that are passions that drive me, that get me out of bed every morning and allow us to create this type of coverage. I think it's fundamentally important. I think it is a lot of fun to tell these stories. It never feels like work, even though there's so much to get to. It feels like an opportunity to do it right finally.
Well, you had the foresight because it's almost like Cheryl Reeve. Like, I'm not going to go the popular opinion or what's easy. I want to go for something that I believe in. Was that a scary decision to make, or was it just a natural progression for you?
It was more like once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. Once you came to
Mm.
understand this was necessary and important, it was something that I wanted to do all of my time. And to be clear, I've covered men's sports. I still cover some men's sports and enjoy it very much. But there is an imperative for getting this right for women's sports. There, to me, it's always been this is where the story is. There is a moral imperative, and I have always believed that frankly, this is where the audience would follow. And the fact that we're going to be nearing 3 million readers at the Next
Mm.
in August alone says everything about the fact that the audience is there and it just keeps growing.
Well, first of all, congratulations on that because
Thank you.
that's a huge feather in your cap as well. And sometimes, and I know talking with Cheryl myself, she says this isn't, just kind of the next big thing. This is a movement. It's not just a moment.
Mhm.
And the numbers are showing it for yours with the Next. When did you have the confidence that if you build it, they will come?
I will be honest with you, I have always had that confidence. To me, what has held back women's sports has never been outcomes and seeing that they're limited, but it's based on the inputs. And that if you simply go and treat the stories in the same way that men's sports gets treated, gets covered, that the audience will follow. That if you have an ability for fans to be able to connect to it on an everyday, consistent basis. There's never one story that's going to turn the tide for women's sports coverage. It's the fact that since June of 2020, when the Next began, we have now had more than 5,000 reported pieces across the world covering
Mm.
women's basketball. It's what has worked in every place I have done this work across the industry. You show up, you bring your best efforts every single day, and you do the work. And that's what it takes. And that's what allows you to build an audience.
What are your insights when it comes to I've covered obviously men's and women's sports, but I'm a female. So my perspective was growing up playing sports that we were not covered, obviously, as
Mhm.
much as the men. We're always secondary. And I don't think we as women athletes thought we were secondary. It was just kind of a known thing. Like, okay, the guys varsity team will get that or the college team will get that and I'll go and support the guys. A lot of the male athletes would come and support the women, but to have the general public come and be like so voracious about it. Have you had young women that have come to you that have kind of had the experience I did growing up? Like it's sparse, like the thanks and the just the this is what I had, and thank you so much for doing this now for us and advancing it.
It is the norm way too much of the time, even now. And again, it goes back to a simple question of why. And no one can really answer that question. And you can even go into the depths of, there's always a reason why in so many legacy media outlets, women's sports gets covered less or women's sports get covered not at all. And artificial barriers are put forward, right? Oh, well,
Mhm.
that's not a winning team, or, well, the attendance isn't quite as high. That again and again, instead of approaching it as we're going to treat these stories all like they matter, and then we're going to see where the audience is. I see also that when we have seen the breakthroughs, a lot of times they have happened by mistake. You can go back to the Yukon team in the mid 1990s that received a lot of coverage in part because Connecticut newspapers had a whole bunch of Hartford Whalers writers who didn't have a sport to cover when there was an NHL hockey strike. And oh, well, there's this young woman named Rebecca Lobo, and she's from in-state, and they've got a very quotable coach in Gino Auriemma. And, fast forward 30 years later, the coverage has been consistent because people went absolutely crazy for that team and the audience was there. And so again and again, it's no harder than show up, give people the opportunity, and they'll do it. You put yourselves in a position as a women's basketball community to see all the games on ESPN. That didn't happen until 2020. March Madness was not allowed to be used by the women's tournament by the NCAA, just like one of the
Right.
greatest self-owns in recent sports history, till 2023. And suddenly, Caitlin Clark in the national championship game outdraws the men's game in ratings 18.9 million to 14.7 million. These things are connected. The inputs lead to the outcomes. Here we are on the media side. We're part of those inputs. We have to get it right.
Well, what I enjoy when we first started, Jim and I, to do this podcast is, yes, I'm a female in sports. Yes, Jim is a male in sports, but when it comes to forwarding strong women and strong women in athletics, you also have to have men that are willing to carry the torch. And I don't like it on the women's side where some women are like, no, this is all about women. It's women power only. You were the perfect example, Howard, of what I wanted to and Jim wanted to bring to the table. That is a strong male that is great at his craft, that has covered men's and also carries the torch for women's sports. There's not too many of you. I know it's growing. I give Jim kudos all the time for advancing women's sports and advancing strong women. Have you seen more men get into it, especially since you've kind of taken the torch and moved it forward?
Well, I appreciate the kind words. I think you're seeing more and more people getting into it as there is a clear audience that is being demonstrated to everyone. And I think it's important to separate the folks who come in with a lack of humility and act as if they've been here the whole time, which is very silly,
Mm,
to those who come in who maybe have not covered before and are now in a position to start to do so. And there needs to be an on ramp. And what we need to do is make that easier and easier for folks to join. If we sit here and say there has not been enough coverage, and then we turn around and gatekeep and keep new voices from being able to contribute to adding to those voices who are covering, then you end up in the same circular place. So I view it as something where when people are coming into this trying to engage and trying to learn, it's important that we do so. And yes, the answer to your question is we've seen more and more people doing that.
Howard, what is the next big step for women's basketball or women's sports in general? I mean, again, we've talked. You feel like we've already had the breakthroughs, the Caitlin Clark, the TV ratings, PWHL success, Minnesota Roar. I mean, in this town, aside from really great prep sports and women's sports at the University of Athletics, University of Minnesota, Suni Lee, Reagan Smith. We have all these great stories. The Lynx have been celebrated, not covered enough, but have been celebrated. It is so many things are in place. What is our next big step? What would the next big step be for either women's basketball or women's sports?
My echoing is it just is doing it again and again.
Yeah.
The audience is
mm,
there, so now it's
yeah.
serving that audience. The audience is there, so it's showing more and more games on TV, finding it more easily because those are in more prominent places to be able to watch the games. It's just continuing to build that infrastructure. The new massive TV deal the WNBA has agreed to for media rights is going to help build that infrastructure as well. But it's just continuing to grow it and showing up day after day. It's really as simple as that. You make it available to folks, people understand the product is incredible, and it just continues to grow that way.
Last question for you, Howard. Thanks again for the time. What did you make of Kathy Engelbert? She was on the Power Lunch CNBC. Was basically asked about all the nastiness and the uh, bigotry being directed at women's basketball players, at her players in social media, and she gave a very, canned answer that really didn't address that specific issue. What did you make of all of that?
Well, look, ultimately, we heard from the WNBPA about it.
Mm-hmm.
Kathy herself last night followed up on those comments on Twitter as well. I think there are two parts to it. I think the first part is that social media is a toxic place, but it is particularly a toxic place for a league that is 80% Black women.
Mm-hmm.
And so being
Mm,
mindful of that is very important. I think the idea that some of that is out of the league's control is absolutely the case. But what needs to be consistent and repeated is the idea that it is unacceptable and that cannot be a way forward for fans to engage. Period. End of story. It's the case across sports. It is, of course, particularly problematic for the WNBA for all of those reasons, for the makeup of the league. And so I think it was probably a useful lesson going forward for Kathy and for the WNBA as well, to essentially say, to be proactive on it rather than reactive on it. And hopefully there'll be continued pushes for this.
Great stuff, Howard. Thanks again. We will be bugging you again at some point in the future.
Absolutely.
Thank you for the time. Thanks for all of your great work, and best of luck in all these endeavors.
Anytime and always. Thank you to you both.